Welcome to Decrypt, Asia's first blockchain and cryptocurrency podcast. I'm your host, Tushar. Each week, we take a deep dive into the Asian blockchain scene with investors, technologists, and industry insiders. Go to decrypt.asia to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Telegram to join in the discussions. Hi, guys. Our guest for today's show is Mike Davie, founder of Quadrant Protocol, a blockchain project that allows for easy access, creation, and distribution of data. Mike was a member of the Advanced Mobile Product Strategy division at Samsung, where he developed go-to-market strategies for cutting-edge technologies created in the Samsung R&D Labs. Thereafter, he founded DataStreamX, an online marketplace for real-time data, allowing companies that produce data to easily monetize and distribute it, and allowing data consumers to source their data requirements in one place. With the emergence of blockchain technology, Mike sought to further improve what he was trying to do at DataStreamX. And as a result, Quadrant Protocol was born. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
Before we dig into what you're building, could you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and what you were doing prior to Quadrant?
Yeah, sounds good. Actually, your intro is better than I could do it myself. So thanks for that. So going back, my career has always been about commercializing new technology. Back in 2005, mid 2000s, I was in China working with 3G network equipment. Basically, before the era of smartphones, when we were first starting to build digital networks. I found myself later on 2010, 11 in Samsung in South Korea, commercializing new mobile technology and smartphones. And then through my tenure there, they pulled me into the infrastructure group. They knew my background in 3G technology, and so I started working on commercialization of technology in networks on the network side. And so during this era, I was basically from Samsung, from Galaxy S1 to Galaxy S4 time. We saw a lot of going on in the network. This is when we were going from 3.5G to 4G. And when we started seeing what was LTE, what were we going to be doing? And a lot of operators were seeing this flood of data, and everybody knew that there's going to be all these connected devices, all these smartphones, connected TVs, smart homes, and such. And they started to look at how are they going to monetize this data? What do we do so this data doesn't crush our networks, rather how do we profit from it and create new services from it? And then that's what actually brought me to DataStreamX. So DataStreamX we launched in 2014, and the whole premise was to help companies monetize their data assets and help companies who are looking for these data feeds to get access to them. And that's sort of the lead up to Quadrant Protocol.
Right. And is DataStreamX still a running company? Are you going to still be running it?
Oh, yes, for sure. So DataStreamX is a data marketplace and transaction platform. And so there's two layers to it. So if you go on to DataStreamX right now, you can go log in. There's stuff from Thomson Reuters and Singtel's DataSpark and FactSet. These companies have APIs that you can purchase access to the data feeds. The other side of our business is where we do high velocity data feeds. So these are big data feeds that have a lot greater value. You're talking about 6 figures per deal for these type of data feeds. And what happened at DataStreamX is in 2017, while we were expanding our market, going from a product fit stage of the company to a growth phase prior to Series A, we went and our buyer groups were asking for more data. So we did a call to all of our suppliers and said, hey, look, we're looking for these data feeds. Do you know how we can get these? Our buyers are looking for these. And that's when 4 companies came to us with almost the exact same data sets. Due to NDAs, we couldn't say to the other person that, hey, by the way, we see this other company has almost the same data. But what we did do is we asked them, where did you get this data from? Do you have rights to sell it? How was it generated? And of course, all 4 companies said, yeah, it's ours. We own the rights. And that's when our engineer shrieks, we have a problem here. That somebody's not telling the truth. And that's when we started looking for solutions. And that's what brought us to blockchain. So the original solution, or the problem from this was we're trying to figure out how we trace the supply chain. And blockchain became a very good solution for this. And then while we were developing the solution at DataStreamX, we realized that it's not just something for DataStreamX, is that something that the protocol can be used by any organizations or a pair of organizations who are looking to transact data. So as DataStreamX will continue to be a company that transacts and sells data, Quadrant Protocol will be is a separate entity under DataStreamX that is a protocol to enable people who, they might want to deal through DataStreamX if they want to deal with the marketplace, but it also can be used for companies who want to do direct transactions between each other.
Okay. And in a few words, could you describe what Quadrant Protocol is and what is the problem that you're trying to address? You kind of touched upon it a little bit when you were describing your experience dealing with suppliers at DataStreamX.
Yeah. So in brief, is that when you look at the data economy, when you say you have a buyer and seller, but when it really comes down to data, there's always many layers of middlemen between, and it's just the nature of data. The end buyer does not want to actually go to each data source. So there'll always be these aggregators. Just give me an example, like Procter and Gamble will never want to interview every single person in the world on how much toothpaste they bought last week. They don't want to do that. They're going to go to people like that aggregate transaction receipts by country or by region or by type of store, and then they buy this aggregated data. And it takes many layers of middlemen between. And this is so there's like all these decentralized data sources that need to be brought together. And that's what Quadrant Protocol does. It maps together these decentralized data sets and enables the buyers to understand the supply chain of data. And that's the whole premise of Quadrant, is to map decentralized data, and so we can have to trace authenticity and provenance of where data is created.
And how does Quadrant Protocol address these problems?
So Quadrant Protocol there's a few layers. The first layer, and what we've already produced in our testnet right now, is a stamping protocol. So when data is created at the source, what happens is it then is brought and stamped. Excuse me. And that metadata is then sent onto the chain. So if that data is consumed in 2 minutes or 10 years from now, the buyer can then go and check to see and make sure that data set is still in its original state. And so that's step one. It's basically proving the authenticity or the provenance of where this data came from. Step two is we'll be having data smart contracts. These contracts will then be able to tie together multiple sources of data for people to either purchase or combine data sets to make a new product out of that. And so what we're doing is that everything in the network can then be transparent on where the supply chain is. So things within the network can be traced back to its source. So I'll give you a clear example here. If a hedge fund's using, say, transaction receipt data to predict how many people are buying at Starbucks, and if all of a sudden they have this data set and the regulators want to understand, hey, where did you get this data from? The hedge fund, if they purchase it, data comes from Quadrant Protocol's network, they'll be able to say, hey, this is where we got it from, and this is their sources. And it's a public ledger that will enable that.
Got it. So essentially, you're a data marketplace with multiple stakeholders who are, I'm presuming, incentivized adequately.
Actually, no. For Quadrant, we actually specifically don't use the word data marketplace because DataStreamX has a true data marketplace. There's buyers and sellers within one interface that they can just go purchase. Quadrant Protocol is just a protocol for the data transactions. Yes, it can be used by marketplaces, but the real purpose is just to enable a transaction between organizations. So technically, buyer A and buyer B can deal directly with each other, and there's not really a marketplace setting that's required in it. So Quadrant Protocol is just the tech that enables the transactions between, but it doesn't necessarily need to be, it doesn't like broker the deals. Like for DataStreamX, for example, we have data that comes in, we process it, we do a lot of value-added services, and then take obviously a larger cut of those deals. Quadrant Protocol, people can so say you're a company, you want to stamp your data, you just pay a gas fee similar to that of the Ethereum network to execute that smart contract, if that makes sense.
I'm not so sure if I understand that correctly, because to me it still seems like Quadrant Protocol will be a place where There are data producers, then there are some stakeholders in the ecosystem who enhance that data, and then data buyers will basically be able to buy that enhanced data. Is that correct? Or
Yeah. So when using the data smart contracts, which are part of the protocol, then yes, in that type of situation, you would see that. I'll give you an example where where we wouldn't be a marketplace, where they just use the stamping protocol. So say, I'm just trying to think here quickly. Say you're CNN and you're buying Thomson Reuters news coming in, and you want to so Thomson Reuters and CNN have a contract. They buy each other's data. They're like, you know what? CNN says that we want to see the stamp. We want to see on the public blockchain that this article you're sending us hasn't been manipulated between the time that you guys created it to the time that our newscast consumes it. So Thomson Reuters, when they create the news, they could stamp the article in Quadrant Protocol. And then whenever CNN then goes to verify the news source, they could actually go back and verify in the chain. So in that situation, it's not that your typical marketplace like CNN and Thomson Reuters didn't buy data via Quadrant Protocol, but what they did was they used a stamping protocol to prove its authenticity.
Got it. Yeah, I think that makes it much clearer, I think. So you've got different stakeholders in the ecosystem and you've given them interesting names. So you've got the nurseries where the data is born, and then the pioneers and the Elons actually take that data to enhance it, to turn that data into products. And then you've got the final consumers. Could you talk about, how these different stakeholders are they incentivized in the Quadrant Protocol to act in the network's benefit overall? And does your token play a role? Could you talk a little bit about the incentivization mechanism?
Yep. So the first thing is when you look at the different stakeholders in there, nurseries are things that produce data. So it could be your smartphone, your computer, a website log, an IoT sensor, a heart rate monitor. These are where the data is born. The next step is your pioneers who bring all that data together, because one data point alone really doesn't have much value. So what you have is that companies then are combining this. So if it's a heart rate monitor, like the Nike heart rate monitor, and they collect all that data, like Strava, they collect all the runners' data, or it could be Uber, who's collecting all aggregated data from their app usage. Those are the pioneers. So the pioneers are collecting from all these different data sources and creating a data product. So MasterCard, for example, will take all their receipt data, and whenever you swipe your credit card, 19 different processes all produce data. But in the end of the day, MasterCard actually sells aggregated data. So if you wanted to understand how many people bought sporting goods in Singapore, you'd be able to go purchase this. So pioneers are the people who are actually formulating products, making data useful, bringing together those stars and making something that people want to consume. The next layer of the Elons is when it gets really interesting. This is as we see as companies develop and the data economy develops, is that we see innovative people creating new solutions. And so Elons are these people, are these companies who are basically aggregating or taking data from multiple sources to create new insights. So it could be a hedge fund or somebody who's trying to create alpha from data. It could be an innovation center in a corporation. Or it could be a data scientist or a startup who's just trying to create a new product. So just think there's a couple of years ago, there was a boom in credit scoring startups. These are people who are realizing once you start combining data, new powerful products and insights can be made. And so those are the Elons.
And how are they incentivized in the network?
Yeah, so depending on when you look at the nurseries as well as the pioneers, they're usually getting compensated by getting paid for their data. So whatever product they create, the token can be used as a purchase mechanism. And in the case of something like a Strava or a Nike, where there's also many sources of data, they can also use a token to compensate those individuals or the individual entities or people who are contributing. And so when you look at the pioneers, people who create data products, they're getting paid basically. They get paid for their data. We focus really on the commercial application of data, and so they're getting compensated there. Elons are interesting because it's twofold. Because Elons are interesting because they actually can buy and sell. So they're a lot of times they're on both sides of the equation. Either they're taking data from the network, they're taking data from all these different sources, and they're building something new. They're either building a new product and then selling that out, or they're building services on top of it. And thirdly, they could also just be using it for their own operations. So their compensation mechanism and how they are incentivized to be in the network is that they're getting access to these data sources that either provide them new revenue or cut operation costs or so forth.
And who do you foresee these Elons to be? Do you think there'll be small companies, startups, existing companies who will be, buying and selling data, enhancing this data?
Yeah, so the great thing is that with DataStreamX, we've been in this business for a while now. So we've formulated our white paper to reflect the reality that we see now. And so with Elon's, one of the things we're doing with our token, you actually asked how do people, what's the purpose of the token? One of the things is what we're doing is we're going to be able to stake for access to data. And so an Elon will be able to stake, okay, we're going to give X amount, and that will give them access to certain types of data sets. And where this came from is actually comes from the flip side of being what can be frustrating in the data economy. So what happens with a lot of companies like innovation centers, like you'll see this in Singapore here where we're based, there's a lot of companies who brought out these innovation centers who really don't quite know yet the value of the data. And same with hedge funds. Hedge funds also they don't want to go out and purchase data first because they don't know the value that it's going to bring, the alpha it's going to bring. So this can be frustrating to people who are trying to sell data because your sales cycle can be 6 months and 12 months. Whereas, and on the buyer side, the same thing, they don't know how to use this data yet. So they don't want to, invest $100,000 or $250,000 in data sets. And so with Quadrant Protocol, what we're going to do is we're going to be enabling the access via staking mechanism so people can get access to it. So when you look at your questions like, who are the Elons? Elons are innovation centers. They're large corporations trying to find new solutions via data. They're the companies who put in and hired 10 new data scientists and still don't quite know what to do with them. It'll also be the hedge funds. These companies, they look to make profit, investment decisions based on data. With the quantitative trading, and that data is becoming more and more important. Also, here you see a lot of analytics companies, companies who are taking more data-driven approach. We see a lot of organizations over the last 4 years here evolve, become not data-driven at all to very data-driven. And then lastly, we also see the Elons as those individual innovators, those people who want to do a startup that need to get access with the advances in AI and machine learning, is that we see a lot of these startups can't really get their feet on the ground yet because they can't get access to data. Compared to the resources that somebody like Google or Facebook that they have, they have a lot of data to run a lot of experiments, whereas young startups don't quite have access to these sources.
And as far as consensus is concerned, so I read that it will be a proof of authority consensus mechanism to ensure scalability. Excuse me. Scalability of the network, along with an external proof of work to ensure security. For the benefit of our listeners, could you elaborate a little bit more on how this works?
Yeah, so if you're familiar with Plasma, it's very similar to that
right.
Prior to Plasma going out. So we're just using proof of authority. We're a sidechain of Ethereum. We anchor into the Ethereum network. That can change, and the reason why, we've been formulating and building our tech since last August. And, if you've been following the space in the beginning of 2018, to have your own consensus mechanism was the coolest thing ever. That everybody was trying to proof of something to be different and raising money off that. We are an enterprise-focused business. we're more practical on it. And so we were looking for a solution that solved our issues. For us, building the blocks was not the number one concern of our clients and the users. They weren't looking for a new way to build a blockchain. They're looking for a blockchain to enable these services. So that's why I went with proof of authority. And actually, in November, where people were always saying, hey, why aren't you making your own consensus mechanism? We actually see a lot of projects now following suit, is that you have to really tailor and understand the limitations of blockchain and what it can do, and ensure that what you're building is usable and can deliver the expectations of the users.
Yeah, I don't think you have to come up with something new for the sake of coming up with something new, which ends up happening a lot in the blockchain space, I guess.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We see a lot of these consensus mechanisms that I'll always, people always ask my opinions on these things, and I'll read through them. But my first question is always why. Like, what? Yeah, whenever you look at commercializing new technology, it's one thing great and it's beautiful to have a new technology. But if it doesn't actually solve a pain point for anybody, then it's technology that's just over-engineered. So that's the approach we take to building out technology.
Yeah, and so I read something about Guardian nodes as well. Could you talk a little bit about who these nodes are going to be?
Yeah, so the Guardian nodes are block creators at the beginning. So DataStreamX and Quadrant Protocol will operate those, and then from there, 2019, 2020, we'll look at how we distribute those.
Sure.
Once again, so with that, the distribution comes with purpose. So we want to ensure before we just distribute for the sake of distribution, there's actually a real reason for that. And the negative thing on when you don't have a distributed block creator is that, can we go back and reverse this? And so that's always something that people will want. And that's why we have the anchoring. And so what the anchoring does, it basically it will periodically put in the block, the hash of the block on our chain onto an external network, so it always can be verified. And so that way you can't roll back without it being.
Could you talk about anchoring a little bit more?
Anchoring is a simple mechanism when you take a block from one chain and then put another. So if you even think of it like Bitcoin and Ethereum, if all of a sudden you take one of Bitcoin's blocks and then anchor that data in Ethereum, now if you wanted to roll back both or roll back Bitcoin, not only would you have to roll back the Bitcoin network, you'd also have to roll back Ethereum's, because you put that in there. And so anchoring is just a simple mechanism that you can take your block and then put it on multiple chains, and then you just have a public verifiable ledger that, okay, wait a second, at this point in time, this was the state of the block.
Got it. And what does your roadmap look like over the next few months? Any particular things that you're focused on, especially like in the next three to 6 months?
Yeah, so right now the main thing is get our mainnet out. So we're just doing security audits and that. So the first thing that is in our testnet that's already going on is the stamping. So it's the first part of our network, and so we are looking between 4 to 6 weeks to have that launched. And then from there in the fall, we'll be working on the data smart contracts and start getting the first ones of those out.
Okay. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to talk about that we may have not covered?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure if your listeners are how global or regional focused in that, but as for us, partnerships are also very important. As you mentioned, there's different stakeholders in our ecosystem. On one side, you have companies who are creating data and trying to either monetize it. And so there's a lot of projects out there that are, doing data marketplaces, monetize your data, monetize personal data, own your data. These are actually one group of partners for us that we're always looking to meet more people who can provide more data into the network. Our buyers are always looking for new data sets. On the other side, we have AI companies who are creating innovative solutions that require data. We have a few partnerships that we'll be releasing shortly here on this. And one of the things that we discussed or that we released previously is that we've with IMDA, which is a government of Singapore, we partnered with them to release an AI and microservice layer on top of the protocol. So what this will do is will enable companies who have cutting edge solutions that want to offer it on top of our data sources to do so. So if there are projects out there, blockchain or non-blockchain related, that are either heavy producers of data or heavy consumers of data, we'd be more than happy to discuss with them.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd be connected to the Physical guys, but we had Justin on the show, which is, so Physical is a location data marketplace based out of Singapore again.
Yes, I've known Justin for years. Okay. So I'm sure there'll be some news one day out there. But no, so Justin, we've known them for years in the location data space, from the DataStreamX time and Beacons in Space time. Yeah. Sure.
And what's the best platform to follow Quadrant Protocol's developments?
Yeah, so the first is always you can go to quadrantprotocol.com where you'll see the latest updates. And the next is you have our Medium. Medium's actually a good source. We do post really regularly on there. So medium.com/quadrantprotocol for all the project updates.
All right, I think that's a good note to end this interview. Thank you, Mike, for taking the time out to come speak with us.
No problem at all. Thanks for your time.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Like us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Telegram, and subscribe to our newsletter on decrypt.asia. This is your host, Tushar. Thank you for listening.